You're listening to Mornings on the Mall with Brian and Larry. I'm Larry O'Connor, alongside Katie Pavlich, who is in for Brian Wilson today. And joining us right now, economist Steve Moore. He joins us, obviously, he is from Heritage Foundation, as well as Wall Street Journal. And we got the jobs numbers here. Steve, this is great. I don't think he even knows the number. I'm going to give it to him right now. We're going to get instant analysis, just like that. Okay. Add water, get your economics analysis. Breaking now from the Associated Press, the U.S. economy added a robust 288,000 jobs in June, the fifth straight big gain, and the jobless rate has dipped to 6.1%. Steve Moore, go.
Hey, Larry, great to be with you. It's a good number, no question about it. This is a big improvement over what we've had the previous year, but you know what? The labor force participation rate is still catastrophically low. And anyone who really believes the unemployment rate in this country is 6.1%, it's about double that when you include people who dropped out of the workforce and just given up looking for work.
So flesh that out for us, please. Explain what the job participation rate means and how that actually changes what the 6.1% number really is.
Well, what it means is we've had about 4 or 5 million people who have just dropped out of the labor force. They've become so discouraged. They're not even looking for a job, Larry. So when the government asks them, are you unemployed, they say, no, I'm not unemployed because I'm not looking for a job because there aren't any jobs. So the real unemployment rate in this country, as the American people know, is closer to 10 to 12%.
Steve, you recently wrote a op-ed in Investors Business Daily about what is the matter with Paul Krugman, and obviously,
I think there's a lot the matter with Paul Krugman.
I mean, I don't know if we can fit that all in, but do you want to explain why his economics aren't really working out right now?
Well, yeah, thank you for.
Where do you start?
Oh. I think Steve Moore's cell just popped out. We'll try to reconnect with Steve Moore in a minute. Yeah, what's the matter with Paul Krugman? I would start with the beard, actually.
Right, yeah.
But it is a good number, 288,000, and it's we've seen some steady increases because let's face it, people at some point employers are starting to hire again, and a lot of the instability, I think, a lot of people weren't hiring because they weren't sure what their costs were going to be with regard to health care. The fact that there were so many questions about Obamacare, the answers aren't great. It is costing a lot more for employers to hire people because of health care, but at least a lot of those questions have been answered, and that's bringing people back into the workforce.
Yeah, I don't know if they've been answered so much, and I think that, as Steve mentioned, the focus needs to be on the amount of people who are not looking for work anymore, which is a huge number. We get very distracted by the 6.1% unemployment. It's dropped by 0.2% number, but that is not an accurate representation of the amount of people who need to be working, who are not working. We have 90 million people in this country who are not working, possibly out of the workforce. That's a really big deal. And those, you look at this number, 288,000, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're even keeping up with population growth at this point.
Stephen Moore is back with us, and we were just talking about what's wrong with Paul Krugman. Go, Steve.
Well, I was just going to say one thing about what you were just talking about. We are still 5.5 million jobs short, 5.5 million jobs short of where President Obama promised us we would be. Remember, we were promised a 5% unemployment rate, and if you take into account the people who dropped out of the workforce, 5.5 million jobs, that's like every person in the state of Ohio not having a job. So we have so far to go, to get back to full employment in this country. And anyone who thinks that, somehow we've turned the corner, I just don't believe it.
I agree. I completely agree. And I think that here in Washington, we tend to live in a bubble because we don't actually see how the unemployment rate is actually affecting small businesses and everyday regular people out there in America.
So, Steve...
Well, the other point related to Krugman, if I may, Larry, is, it's interesting, some parts of the economy are still in recession. I mean, the Northeast is getting killed. Now, who runs the Northeast? Those are, deep blue states run by people like Cuomo and states like Rhode Island and Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, my home state of Illinois getting clobbered. Meanwhile, the southern states, and especially states like Texas and Tennessee and Florida, states like Utah, Arizona, are doing really well. And who runs those states? Those are red states. And so there is a big red state, blue state divide in this country when it comes to the economy.
Well, it's a great point. And I saw somebody do an analysis the other day that took the state of Texas out of the jobs numbers from the last couple of years. And the results for America are devastating.
Yeah, you know, 1 million jobs have been created in 5 years in Texas. 500,000 jobs have been lost in California. Now, when I've debated Paul Krugman on why the red states are doing so much better, what he said was, and I'm messing this up, he said, well, that's because of weather. You know, that's true. Or Fort Lauderdale. You take Fort Lauderdale, but you know, I asked Krugman. I said, "Well, if that's true, if people are just moving for the weather, then Paul, tell me. I know you've got a Nobel Prize. Tell me why people are moving from San Diego, California, to Houston, Texas? Because I don't think they do that for the weather."
Right, exactly. The weather's much nicer in San Diego, I guarantee you that. Well,
you're a Californian, you know that. I mean, here's the point I would make, Larry. How do you screw up California? I mean, you've got beautiful mountains, beautiful beaches, beautiful women. You know, what's not to like about California? And people, the middle class is leaving California because they can't afford to live there. The taxes are too high. The jobs have disappeared. It's a great example of how you screw up a state with liberal policy.
Steve Moore, our guest is Steve Moore from Heritage Foundation. We're talking about the economy right now in America and the job numbers we just got. And I got to ask you, in light of recent events and what's going on down in Texas and Arizona and California, despite how strong Texas has been, as we see this border crisis intensify in such a major way, it's unsustainable, is it not, for Texas to have to absorb all of these illegal immigrants and absorb the costs involved with them?
Well, look, I think actually Texas has been a state that's greatly advantaged by immigration. You know, they have some of the hardest working people in the world, and Texas proves, you know, if you have a pro-growth environment, you can create the jobs, and the people will come to fill those jobs.
But the people who are coming right now are not—they're not looking for jobs. These are children.
That's the problem, Larry, and I agree with you. I think that what's happened in the last few weeks and the lawlessness at the border has really made it much, much less possible for us to get, you know, some kind of sane immigration system. So we're getting the immigrants that we need. But you know, it's interesting. You know, I know you hail from California. You know, if you look at Hispanics in California versus Hispanics in Texas, the Hispanics in Texas do much better than the Hispanics in California, because in Texas they put the immigrants into jobs. In California, you put them in the welfare state.
That's true. That's a big difference.
So, I mean, obviously, as we see this crisis intensify, the immediate solution needs to be to get, help these kids out by sending them back to their families. But ultimately, you are in favor of a certain level of immigration reform to help the economy, right?
Oh yeah, well look, we need, as Larry Kudlow calls them, the brainiacs. You know, I hear Larry on your show all the time, and he's right. You know, we need the smart, the skilled, the engineers, the people. Like anyone who wants to come to this country, Larry, and work and build themselves up, just like my grandparents did. You know, I'm in favor of that. What I'm not in favor of is, Barack Obama saying, come into the country, we'll give you food stamps, we'll give you housing subsidies, we'll give you, all of these free things. And so we're starting to attract immigrants who want to come here for a handout, not for a job.
Stephen Moore, we got to leave it there. Thank you very much, sir. Enjoy your Independence Day weekend.